I am so excited today to share this interview that I had with Mr. Alan Lee, one of my absolute favorite Tolkien artists, and I'm sure one of yours as well. Now, today's interview is going to be a little bit different in that the first half is going to be here on Nerd of the Rings. The second half is going to be over on the Folio Society's channel. And in between segments, I will also show off the unboxing of this brand new, beautiful, limited edition of The Hobbit from Alan Lee and the Folio Society. But without further ado, enjoy this delightful conversation with Alan Lee. Welcome everyone to Nerd of the Rings. I have a very special guest with me today, Mr. Alan Lee. Alan, thanks so much for taking the time out to join us today.
It's a pleasure. I've watched quite a few of your shows so far, and always enjoy them.
Oh, that's
pleasure to be invited. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you, and I'm thrilled that you enjoy my videos. That is a highlight of my day already. So we haven't even started talking yet. Well, I always like to start people off asking, how were you first introduced to Tolkien?
Well, I was about 17 years old, and I was not at art school at that time. I was in between art school, and I was working in a cemetery, filling in graves and keeping the graves tidy and just doing general kind of garden labouring. And a friend of mine who was working at nights in a garage forecourt started lending me the Lord of the Rings. He had the 3-volume set, and when he finished the first one, he passed it on to me. And I was completely kind of bowled over by the whole thing. I'd read quite a lot of mythology and folklore when I was growing up, and this just seemed like it taken all my favorite stories and kind of synthesized them into this amazing epic, and I just loved it.
How did you get into art? Was that from an even younger age, or was that later on?
Well, I'd always drawn right from early childhood, and drawn and made stuff. You know, I'd make castles and like out of cardboard cereal packets or fortifications in the garden, just made from earth and so on. I collected toy soldiers and I just played with them, and I built these environments for them. And drawing was just a part of that, really. So the sheet of paper was just another environment that I could kind of populate with characters on various quests.
Yeah.
And I started doing comic strips as well when I was about 13 or 14. And I read a lot of comics at that time, and read a lot generally. And so my imagination was always being fired by what I was reading and what I was seeing as well. Various films had a big influence, like the Thief of Baghdad. I don't know if you know that.
I don't
know.
Classic
film. It's a kind of Arabian Nights sort of fairy tale. Highly recommend it.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
Yeah. So anything that had a kind of historical or, like the Vikings, Kirk Douglas in the Vikings, if you know that one, but they're all sort of big influences. And then a little bit later, Jason the Argonauts,
Oh yeah.
all this great stuff. So it kind of led me towards fantasy and what I was reading as well, just folklore and myths and legends. And so I'm just kind of putting that down on paper, but it didn't occur to me that I could do anything with this apart from just enjoy myself. And until I went to, I switched schools to a school that had a specialized art department when I was 13. And I was able to spend about a quarter of the week just drawing, and that just led on naturally to art school. And I went to Ealing School of Art when I was 16, And it just suddenly felt as though I'd kind of been reborn into this totally new world. It was quite wonderful.
It's great. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Well, that just kind of led into me kind of experimenting with various different forms of art, but eventually kind of settling on illustration.
Now, obviously, you've had a very long career illustrating Tolkien, to the point where, that so many of us have, discovered that world through your illustrations and through John's and through Ted's. I'm curious, how did, that marriage of something that you've been a fan of since you were 17, and then, a few decades later, you're illustrating it. How did that come to pass that you started illustrating Middle Earth?
Well, yeah, I think when I was at art college, I was illustrating old Irish myths and medieval romances and Arthurian stuff as well. They more or less kind of left me to do what I wanted. The course was very much focused on advertising, but I couldn't get to grips with that. But but I understood a little bit more about druids and warriors and so on. So they just kind of left me in my corner to get on with that. And I didn't think that I'd be able to kind of make any kind of career out of it, but I did put together a portfolio, and then after another short stint working as a gardener, I'd launched myself, and I was just really lucky in that I met early on this great art director called David Larkin at Panther Books, and he just gave me 6 book covers to do straight away, which enabled me to get an agent.
Yeah.
And I was able then to start building a career as an illustrator. And my main object at that time was just to be able to earn a living through drawing and painting. And so I found myself doing a lot of book covers. And gradually that tended to focus on the more kind of like Victorian ghost stories and historical fiction and whatever fantasy might turn up. And also I was given a studio in my agent's offices along with about 15 other illustrators, and that was a great kind of start because you could see what they were doing, and any work that came in that they didn't want to pick up, I could perhaps have a
take a go at it.
Get the gleanings of the work that was around, and I did a lot of very kind of odd things. But the paperback covers, I did almost the entire run of Fontana books of great ghost stories and Panther books of horror stories and so on. And then I moved to Devon. I took this great step only about 5 years into my career of moving away from the center of publishing activity, moving away to Devon. And but fortunately I took a friend with me, Brian Froud, who was also sharing the studio in London. And so he came down. He was our lodger for a while in this little house in a little town in the depths of the country. And we were both really wanted to kind of get into landscape and into folklore and fairy tales and so on. And we had both independently met Ian Ballantyne. I don't know if you're familiar with
Ballantyne books, yeah.
Ian and Betty Ballantyne, who had an amazing influence at that time in the whole kind of science fiction and fantasy world. And they were producing at that time a series of books on sort of Victorian Golden Age illustrators like Edmund Dulac and Arthur Rackham and so on. And and they would wanted to do one on contemporary illustrators who were kind of following in that sort of tradition.
Yeah.
So Brian and myself were both invited to contribute to this, which was meant to be some kind of retrospective, but neither of us really had work we wanted to show, so we just did paintings especially for it.
Yeah.
And that just led on to, I'm not sure if it made much of an impact really, but it just kind of led us onto the idea of kind of working together. And Ian Ballantyne then, he'd had a big success with a book called Gnomes, and he wanted to follow up to that, so he invited Brian and myself to do a book called Fairies, which was fairly successful.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, then Brian moved in, started working with Jim Henson on The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. And I started getting more involved with Celtic myth, so I did a book called The Mabinogion, which is one of my favourite books, a collection of these Welsh medieval legends. And then I did a book called Castles, which was a look at castles in myth and legend and literature. And I put a couple of Tolkien's castles into that book. And that happened to be picked up in England by the same publisher that was publishing Tolkien, Armin Hyman.
Yeah.
And so that led to a kind of relationship developing with that publisher, and in particular with the editor Jane Johnson, who has since become a novelist in her own right, but she was managing the Tolkien and fantasy section there. And then she came up with the idea of trying to persuade the Tolkien estate that there might be an illustrated edition of The Lord of the Rings. And with the centenary coming up, that was a good opportunity to try and put that into effect. So, I was very keen on the idea, and you had to persuade Christopher Tolkien that it would be good, and he wasn't quite sure, so I had to do some drawings of some of the characters. So I did a kind of lineup of the Fellowship, and sent it off to him, and he came back with an approval.
Oh, I was wondering what Christopher's reaction, if you ever got feedback over the years from Christopher.
Yeah, quite a bit on various projects, but there's one bit of feedback initially was to concentrate more on the landscapes and the places, and not to get too close to the characters, because I think that was probably the area that he was most concerned about. How the hobbits and so on would be represented.
Yeah.
And that really fitted in with my own desires as well. I was really kind of very keen on landscape painting. And so I produced 50 illustrations for that edition. And Christopher was pretty happy with them. I didn't have to do roughs at that stage, and I just did the pictures and then submitted them, and they all went through. With that particular edition, the pictures could only go in certain places in the book because of the way that it was bound, and the picture being printed onto a special art paper. And so I didn't have this big choice of what to actually illustrate.
Yeah.
And which was great, because it would have been quite a crippling series of decisions to have to make. What do I actually want to illustrate? But you've come to a page of text, and you want to kind of have a picture opposite it.
Yeah.
But there's so much happening on every page that it was, yeah, it was a dream job, really. It was wonderful.
Now, you mentioned doing landscapes, and one of the new pieces, we have this limited edition coming out with Folio Society, who you did Lord of the Rings with previously on a limited edition. Now we're doing The Hobbit, and you actually have a new piece of Rivendell here that I can pull up, a gorgeous piece. What can you tell us about this and about working with Folio Society? What was that like working on this book?
Well, it's great because the quality of their production is just wonderful. And I've been collecting Folio Society books for a long time myself, and
they're really nice. Yeah,
enjoying them. And this particular picture, we established when I did the Lord of the Rings with them that they wanted to have a print and the opportunity to do something in a landscape format, as opposed to the normal portrait format that you get in books. Is very appealing, and I have done a kind of a similar subject to this before, but being able to kind of open it out and see a little bit more of the Rivendell Valley was a nice opportunity. With the previous edition of Lord of the Rings, I chose to do Aragorn and Gandalf above Minas Tirith, where they've gone up to look for the sapling of the white tree.
Now you mentioned. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's been very nice working with the Folio Society. They're just interested in the quality, and that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've been very impressed with the ones that I've gotten over the years. They're fantastic, and a good pairing with your fantastic illustrations as well. When you mentioned focusing on landscapes, it kind of jogged to memory. I remember a while back you did a Q&A, and I heard an answer that you gave where you talked about not going for like the biggest moments to illustrate, and to how that better served the story. I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit here, because I thought that was really interesting.
Well, that's part of, I was just explaining about having to just illustrate what was going to be on the page that was kind of already predetermined, and but that also suited a general aversion to kind of trying to go for just the big dramatic subjects, because that's what the author is kind of really building up to. And I think it's partly the way that I kind of enjoy illustrated books myself. I really want the author. I don't want anyone coming between me and the author in any major way. And I think if I can kind of establish the atmosphere and the setting and make something believable, that's just going to enhance your experience of reading the work and getting as much from it as possible. So yeah, it's not wanting to be in competition with or being in between the author and the readers. It's just kind of adding a little bit of music or atmosphere in the background.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So when it came to this Hobbit limited edition, you've got some previously illustrated works in there. You've got some new pieces. You've got some pieces that you've revisited as well. What did they have thoughts on what you should do, or at this point is it do they just say, Alan, whatever you want to do sounds good to us?
Well, there was some things that I wanted to read. I mean, it's more or less the edition that I produced in about '96 for HarperCollins, and but they just wanted to reproduce the color and the pencil drawings as well. But there were a few pictures in there that I wasn't quite happy with, and I wanted to rework them. In the end, I didn't do as many new pieces as I thought I might. It just proved to be not really practical. But very often with these books, particularly with me, I find myself spending too much time in the beginning. When you have a deadline, you just kind of you kind of waste time in a way in the early stages, really kind of making the pictures as perfect as possible, and then you kind of pay for that later on as the deadline gets closer. And I remember on the last night, and it was a hard deadline for some reason or other, and it was 3:00 in the morning before delivering this. all the pictures, all the remaining pictures, and there was one picture which I decided I was just going to do really quickly, and it was going to be more or less just a landscape with tiny figures in it, and I was going to try and do as much of the landscape as possible in one wash. So I mixed up this very it's kind of a night scene. It was actually the company kind of making their way towards where the troll shore, so kind of in the wild country. So it's a big sort of wet sort of nighttime scene, and I mixed up this wash and started at the top of the picture and was kind of working it with my brush as we were going down, and I was about a third of the way down, and the lights went out. And there was a power cut, so I know that if you stop painting, you get this kind of horrible hard line developing.
Oh, yeah.
So I just had to keep on painting in the dark, to keep this wash kind of flowing down the paper. And unfortunately, the lights came back on after about 3 or 4 minutes.
Wow!
And breathed a sigh of relief and was able to finish the picture. But it always niggled me that was just painted so quickly. So I decided to redo that. So I spent a lot more time producing another version of that particular painting. And I also redid a picture of Gollum and Bilbo meeting in the cave. But it's mainly the original, the artwork from the original edition.
Yeah. You've obviously done a lot of Middle-earth illustration over the years. Is there a character, location, or moment from the books that you'd like to illustrate someday that you haven't been able to do yet? Or have you fully checked off your list and now everything's just bonus? Or is there, I'm curious if there's something that in the back of your mind you've been thinking, gosh, I really would like to do that someday.
That's a really interesting question. Yeah, I don't particularly want to go back into the Lord of the Rings itself or the Hobbit, but some of the the second age and first age stuff would be really interesting to do.
Yeah.
But I've done quite a bit of the second age stuff now with the Great Tales.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't particularly want to go into the Silmarillion because Ted Naismith has done a great job on all that stuff, and he's devoted so much time to it, and
right.
So it feels like kind of surplus to requirements.
If you were to do a Silmarillion illustration, what story or what character or location would you be drawn to, you think?
I'm not sure. One that the whole story of Earendel is it's very compelling, and I kind of touched on that in the Fall of Gondolin.
Yeah.
But that was one of the stories that I think Tolkien himself would have wanted to kind of expand on.
Yeah.
And develop. And so I've done a couple of little drawings of that, but just the whole idea of the ship floating through the night sky, becoming the evening star, and the Silmaril and everything. It's the stories are just wonderful, and there's so much beauty and profound thought in all of that.
We've had the pleasure of seeing your illustrations brought to life through the films. I'm curious of the other, non-Lord of the Rings and Hobbit illustrations you've done. Is there one that you think, wow, that would be cool to see brought to life on film? Or even things that I guess Ted has done, even in the Silmarillion, is there Middle-earth stories that you, just as a Tolkien fan, think that you'd love to see on film someday?
I guess so. I guess it's going to happen anyway. whether we like it or not, I think it's going to be kind of pretty thoroughly explored at some point. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I need to think about that one.
Okay, fair enough. It's a deep world, so it requires some and rewards deep thought when it comes to Tolkien, for sure. Obviously you have another film on your resume coming out. You did a few weeks of work, from what I hear, on War of the Rohirrim. Is there anything you can tell us about what kind of illustration and what kind of work you were up to on that?
Yes, they wanted me to do some work in the area of Isengard. So they wanted some buildings in Isengard where certain and a camp where some action could take place, and they wanted the architecture to be not of Isengard, so it would look like something that had been built after the original building had been created, and then would be kind of would have disappeared by the time of Saruman taking over, and so they wanted these kind of more or less temporary sort of garrison buildings and so on. So I did some designs for that and for the encampment, and also some designs for the tunnels around Helm's Deep. And so the buildings that we'd established in the Lord of the Rings, of Edoras and Helm's Deep, they had been very carefully kind of recreated by some brilliant designers for this film. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they look like on film in the background. But I haven't actually seen anything apart from the trailer, which I guess everyone has seen now. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the whole thing comes out.
Now, we've got a lot more great talk with Alan Lee, but before we hop over for part 2, I thought we'd do a quick unboxing of this brand new limited edition so you guys can see it shown off prior to it going on sale next week. I always appreciate when books are sent well packaged. Always love that. The way this is wrapped feels kind of like a Christmas gift. Wow. Oh my gosh. Man, this is impressive. That is gorgeous. Oh my gosh. Okay, I underestimated how big this book was going to be, honestly. Oh, that's really cool, though. Okay, so on the outside here, we've obviously got an image of Bag End. We've got the 3 trolls. So we're seeing the story play out in quick succession here. We get a little Gollum. A little Gollum action. We've got Beorn there in bear form, it looks like. We see the barrels. Barrels out of Bond. Bilbo up in the trees. Smaug, obviously. And then we've got Bard the Bowman. Very cool. All right. Let's get to the goodies here. And then there is an image inside, if you guys can see that, of Bilbo walking through Mirkwood. You can kind of make it out. It's kind of hard to make out, but you've got Bilbo walking through Mirkwood that wraps around in the inside there. That's pretty awesome. Oh, here we go. This is the Rivendell piece that comes with the book. So this is the new one that Alan was telling us about. Beautiful piece of Rivendell. And as Alan pointed out, landscape, he doesn't do a whole lot of landscape because he does these illustrated editions. They're traditionally in portrait mode. So, man, that's a beautiful piece. That would look great in a frame. That's probably what I'm going to do with this, is find a small frame for it. Rivendell, by the way, one of my favorite Middle-earth locations. I would love to just chill in Rivendell. All right, and then we've got this hardbound fold-out map. Got the map of Wilderland and Thror's map to Erebor. And then something that a lot of people don't notice, they just kind of look at Thror's map and don't think anything of it. But north is actually to the left on this map. Right here, it gives you an indication. Far to the north are the Grey Mountains and Withered Heath, whence came the Great Worms. So the dragons came from the north. Mirkwood, the forest, is over here to the west. And then, of course, we can see, this is much more zoomed out over on this side. So we can see Esgaroth, Lonely Mountain, the Grey Mountains, where it talked about the dragons coming from the north. And then, obviously, Mirkwood here to the west of Erebor. So there we go. Thror's map and a map of Wilderland. So that and the art print of Rivendell come with the book. And the main feature here, of course, is the book itself, featuring a wonderful front image here of Gandalf and Bilbo and the company. This presumably after he's just come out of the Misty Mountains and gotten the ring from Gollum and catches back up with the company. So here we go. And each of these is, of course, signed by Alan Lee. This page obviously tells us a bit about the edition itself, and also mentions here that it's limited to 1,000 copies, which we knew. Now, I'm anticipating that these will probably go pretty fast. So if you're a collector and you're looking to get your hands on this limited edition of The Hobbit, I would recommend hopping on it right on November 19th when it comes out. I'll be honest, I haven't been saying much as I've been flipping through this because I'm just entranced by this gorgeous book. This is really, really cool. Not just the illustrations, which are always fantastic, but even the borders around the illustrations. And the little illustrations that are at the beginning of each chapter. The chapter headers are just fantastic. And real quick, I wanted to take a look at the images that Alan mentioned he had repainted. And so here we have one of Bilbo and Gollum in Gollum's cave for the first time. You can kind of see the difference there between the two. And this is probably a good time to show the size comparison. Just like this limited edition is a very big book. This is the Hobbit copy from the Alan Lee illustrated edition of the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings box set. And as you can see, the new limited edition is quite a bit bigger. And I have to say, I am a big fan. I like big books, and I cannot lie. I'm sorry, that's terrible. And here we have the second illustration that Alan mentioned that he had completely redone from scratch. We can see the company here making their way in the foreground and a very foggy, misty, dreary landscape in the back. And you can tell the amount of detail that he put in on this new version is really, really impressive. We see a river flowing through. They're crossing a bridge. We see all these trees and boulders in the foreground, the ruins of an old structure in the background. I think I'm never one to complain about Alan Lee's artwork, and I never will be, but I think this shows the extra effort that he went into in this new version. It looks really, really good. Well, there you go, guys. It is the Hobbit limited edition by the Folio Society, illustrated by the one and only Alan Lee. And I'm sure the collectors are going to be going nuts over this one. It drops on November 19th. I'll put the link in the description for those interested in ordering it. Now, if you're one of those people that's interested in picking this up, I would not dilly-dally about it because I'm sure this will go quite fast. I think they've done a really, really good job here. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous book. I've been a fan of Folio Society books for quite some time, and the few that I have in my collection, I really, really enjoy. The Lord of the Rings box set that I have, really like those, but this is just on a whole other level. Really, really special edition of The Hobbit here. Now, I'll have the link in the description if you're interested in checking this out. If you are one of those collectors out there who's going to want to pick this up, I would suggest not delaying because I think these 1,000 copies will go quite fast. But now that we've had the chance to check out a bit of the book, click here or go to the link in the description to check out part 2 of my interview with Alan Lee.